I'm delighted to connect with Robyn Curnow. You probably remember her if you watched CNN at all in the last 20 odd years, because there she was. And born in Australia, but we know her as one of ours, a South African. And how long have you lived there now?
Well, it's been 10 years. Can you believe it? It feels like a million years. And when I first moved here, and I'm in the deep south, I'm in Atlanta, at times it felt like I was living on a different planet. Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. Try moving to America in the deep south after, all those years in South Africa. It does feel like a different planet. But I figured it out. Although I could do with having some cricket and rugby around the corner. I do miss that.
Not so easy to access, is it?
Not so much. I mean, I have to do little fiddles with various VPNs to find the cricket, but I manage. Don't worry.
Why did you go there in the first place? Was it just the
CNN.
dream?
No, CNN. So I started working for CNN 20 years ago in the London bureau, and that's where I met my husband Kim, who currently runs a lot of CNN's operations and security. He's actually in Israel now. So we were there and based in Europe, and then we were sent over as a couple to run CNN Africa. So he was the bureau chief, and I was the correspondent, as you will remember. So I was CNN's Africa correspondent for what, 6, 7, 8 years. And then, that was through Madiba and Madiba's death. It was through the Oscar Pistorius trial and all of that. And then once all of that had happened, sort of early 2014, CNN called me up and said, "Come, we need you to come over and anchor a show." So I anchored my show from Atlanta, from head office here in Atlanta for nearly 10 years, and left CNN just sort of in the last few years to A, recalibrate, B, to look after teenage daughters. As anybody knows, that's a full-time job, particularly while my husband's been traveling quite a lot. He ran CNN's coverage in Ukraine as well. So it's been great. It was a good decision. It was the right time to leave. So I'm really excited about all sorts of things
And
happening
you're
now.
you're doing a podcast, and I think that's
Yeah.
that we spoke about it a little while back. And what I like about it is you're doing the modern day version of Letter from America almost, but this is an outsider's view of what goes on inside. Am I right? Is that kind of it?
Exactly. I've always loved sitting on the fence, that old school way of journalism where you sit on the fence and you kind of weigh up things on both sides. And, I started off with the SABC, and Alistair Sparks was one of my first editors, and he was great at that. Those early years of the SABC and the Madiba presidency, you had to be able to give quite a big overview to reflect back at South Africa as sort of this changing nation. We were all trying to cobble together and understand each other. And I feel like American media has lost that. There's sort of these silos of opinions, sort of couched as news. And I was in the middle of it as well. I was in the sausage machine. So it's been really liberating, kind of withdrawing from that and kind of the day-to-day constant drama, and then trying to sort of look at America, which is such a fascinating concept, as well as a country, and kind of just sort of try and understand my neighbors. Because I realized that they were going to be voting for Trump. And, you can't write off 300 million people as racist, sexist, bigoted, dumb people, because they're not. And I really wanted to understand kind of the movements and the instincts of my neighbors as to why Trump would win, which I knew he would win, just by having conversations here in the South. So, and I think and I'm really enjoying it, because I think a lot of people are sort of on this journey with me. We're like, just give me a sense of why this is happening, not tell me what you think is happening. And so I've really enjoyed it.
And quite interesting for me watching the whole inauguration speech yesterday, which
Yes.
I think when it's published will be 4 volumes. It wasn't short, and at times he definitely went off script, and you could tell. And um, it was just the old rhetoric coming out again, whereas the speech I think was written well to reflect, his mood and the mood of the majority of the country. Um, I must be the first to say that I wasn't his biggest fan. I'm still not a fan of the man. But do you think he got back in because enough people were just fed up with all the stuff that impacts them so personally every day?
Yeah. And I think that's what's so critical about this election, not the first time around, but this time around, this Trump 2.0, he has, and he mentioned it in his speech, how he has this very broad mandate, and he thanked African Americans and he thanked Hispanics. And he has this, everybody, every single demographic across the country has moved a little bit right in the last 4 years, and particularly in the last 6 months. And it's reflected in his win. So, so what is also interesting when I talk to my neighbors is that they don't like him. They still, some of them hold a real grudge about January the 6th. They don't like his personal behavior, the way he treats women or the things he says. They don't like sometimes what he looks like, but they agree with the broad instinct of his policies. And I think there's a disconnect between the man and what he's kind of politically offering America. And he's offered a reboot. And I think that's what's so interesting is that the reboot is about, in many ways, moving away from Joe Biden's last 4 years. I laughed the other day.
I
Somebody
mean,
said,
and he was saying it outright. I mean,
exactly.
I kept
But this
hoping
is
the
not just,
camera would be on Biden, and
well, exactly.
by the time
But
the
what's
worst
so
insults had
interesting,
left. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, what's so
Yeah.
interesting is that Americans agree with him, is that the Biden administration went too left, that they actually became extremists in a way. And in many ways, Americans are looking, ironically, at Donald Trump to move the country more center. And there was a really funny thing that I read was that, I thought one of the inauguration balls, there was the village people, the original village people out there with Donald Trump dancing to YMCA. And the whole thing was kind of absurd because, of course, this is a LGBTQ, gay guys from New York and chaps, and it's just the gayest song ever, really. And many people were like, well, you can see how badly the Biden administration has done in the last 4 years when you lose the village people. And so it's just one of those fascinating shifts. And there are many reasons for it. And I think one of them, and this is why, if you listen to his speech, the tone of his speech was both negative and positive at the same time. But inherently, he was trying to be optimistic. And he was trying to say, we have a plan. And he's got three main, or I would say two main issues. One, immigration, B, anti-woke. And I think you were mentioning
I don't know
that.
if you're allowed to say one and then B, by the way.
Oh, that's true. What? You know why? Because I'm dyslexic, and that's a whole nother
Oh, that's
conversation.
absolutely right. You are.
Yes, I
Well,
am. I'm a very proud dyslexic. So I do that often to catch people out.
it worked.
Or I just don't even realize I'm doing it. But I'm a yes. So I'm very dyslexic, but have 3 university degrees. And but we can talk about that another time. But what's so interesting about the anti-woke stuff is that it alienated the very people that these very worthy policies around diversity, equality, and inclusion alienated the very people that they were aimed to protect. And I think what you see now is going to be this slimming down, as you've seen with which is what's coming with Doge, and there's going to be a very big focus on efficiency and competency, and that I think is what is Americans are paying for with this vote, and they trust Donald Trump particularly more when he brought in all the tech bros, all the most successful businessmen in the last 20, 30 years, the guys behind Facebook and Uber and SpaceX, they know that they can run a company. And he brought them in, and Americans were like, well, we want a bit of that. We want a bit of Silicon Valley. And so he's promised them that, and that's what it looks like he's going to try and give them.
I wonder if there's ever been such a gathering of those heads in one
Yeah.
space ever. Because I mean, most of them are in competition with each other in some way or the other. Absolutely
Yeah.
remarkable. And I think that does say so much in the same way that I think he's already been having conversations with heads of state, from we don't know anymore what's real news, if you're watching Fox or if you're watching CNN, you really don't know. So we kind of wonder about it. But I think the world's ready for that reboot. And I think that my sense is that the people who voted were just desperate to try something else. You know, when you're used to doing upholstery on a car seat, and now there's not a car seat manufacturer within 500 miles where you live. Well, what else can you do? So I don't know. In the end, he's a politician.
Yeah.
He's the businessman in the background, but he's a politician, and he's going to say the things that are going to get people to like him. But he's going to be, once Elon and all the boys have started trimming in the way that they're going to, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people out of work. So those people aren't going to think it's such a good idea, but, maybe they're going to do it in a way that still empowers those people to be able to make a living.
And I think what we're seeing here is is a generational, almost historic change that is about to befall the world. And I'm talking here about AI and about the kinds of shifts. We're really only emerging into the 21st century now. And all those tech bros have all said and are all part of this AI revolution that is happening now. It's not 5 years down the line, it is right now. And I think a lot of the conversations around what the future looks like, what do jobs look like, how does society look, not just in 50 years for our kids, but in how do we control it, how do we navigate it, and how do we set up guardrails? And America is basically, and Trump and these tech bros have looked at each other and they've said, we're at this point where we either lose control of the future by virtue signaling and being concerned about sort of gender, racial sort of structures within society and relitigating the past. We can keep on doing that. Or we can try and deregulate for the future. And I think that is what is so critical about this administration, is that, yes, in many ways, Trump's instincts are potentially to go after political enemies and to be vindictive. But he's also acutely aware that he doesn't have a lot of time. And he's also acutely aware that he has a lot of political capital right now. So I am of the instinct, which is why I'm slightly optimistic, that this is going to be a very surgical, very disciplined, and you've seen it already in the way these executive orders have been rolled out, the way the staffing has been rolled out. There is going to be a very, very focused emphasis by this administration to, like I said, deregulate for the future and then lay the foundation so that America doesn't own the future, but at least has control over the narrative of what's going to happen. So yes, you can talk about this great power competition between America and China, but there need to be rules in place. So this whole conversation around AI and crypto, David Sachs, a South African by family connections, is going to be running all of that. So you have to be deregulating and figuring out how to deregulate crypto and centralizing AI. You have to make sure that AI is allowed to innovate in ways that benefit societies and benefit the future. But at the same time, you can't overregulate that so that you limit that innovation. And you can't let things run away. So there's going to be this constant push-pull, this tug between, like I said, the sort of tech bros and their need to mold the future and to kind of just let things happen. And it's what's so interesting about this is that Trump is playing the CEO. And he said to his team, run with it, boys, but you need to keep on checking in with me. And so there really is sort of a corporatization, I think, which what they're trying to do within the American government, the cost cutting within the federal bureaucracy. That is really important if these guys and these, they call themselves founders. And anybody who knows the story of Silicon Valley knows that founder mode is that mode, that tech startup mode, where you're trying to innovate with as little money as possible. You're focused on production and you're focused on trying to create something out of nothing. He's turning and trying to put the American government into founder mode. And I think that what is exciting. And that is why so many Americans are optimistic about this administration. Over 60% of Americans say they're looking forward to this. In particular, 18 to sort of 30-year-olds are particularly excited and supportive of the change that is coming. So yes, you might have a bunch of folks who are working in federal government who haven't come into the office in the last 3 years and who are dialing it in and who are constantly complaining about, the small minutiae of identity politics. They are going to be unhappy, yes, but 5 years' time, those jobs, if Donald Trump and Elon Musk have anything to do with it, those jobs are going to be rebooted into something else that is more effective and more efficient.
You know what I think is
So
also
I
going to
think
be,
this is what's so interesting.
I think what's great for those tech bros, as you call them, is that now they've got a purpose much bigger than just making money and having successful businesses. Now they've got to find a way as a team, and we've got it in a very small way in South Africa where we've got top
Look at home
businessmen.
affairs.
So now suddenly Elon's gonna say no, we can't do that if, and and Bezos is gonna say, well, hang on, I did. Why don't we try it like this? Because it worked. I mean, I'd love to be in on those meetings, and I'm sure
Yeah.
lots of us would. But it's not only just going to be about America now, as
Yeah.
much as Donald J wants it to be, because the impact that he's talking about already on the other countries that supply him. I mean, there's talk now that we're gonna be paying 100% tariff to get our stuff into the country. Well, I don't believe we have that kind of profit available anyway in the beginning. So there's going to be lots of enemies, and maybe in time he's going to have to soften his stance a bit further down the road. What's your sense?
My sense again is that you don't. A lot of his bluster. I was right in the middle of it in that first term, and you've got to try and learn to read Trump and what he's doing. And so again, you don't have to like him as a person. You might be turned off with him on sort of the way he conducts himself, or even the way he articulates himself, the cadence of his speech. It's very difficult to kind of take him seriously sometimes. But if you peel back all of that, what I think is really important. So you talk about the tech bros, but they're also the isolationists within this government. This America First policy is very much an internalizing of looking after America. So what is the impact for the globe? Well, first of all, there's that old adage that when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. So there is going to be an impact, definitely globally, to what happens particularly in the next 2 years, this first bit of the administration. And I think for me, it's important to remember Trump does not want, and he said it, he does not want any new wars. He wants to wrap up the wars that are happening, and he doesn't want to start any. However, he is belligerent, and he's already threatening, if you take him literally, to invade Panama and Greenland, and talking about building condos in Gaza and in North Korea. That stuff sounds cuckoo head, but don't mistake that bluster for the real geopolitical and security imperative for America that underlies those things. So the Panama Canal is a strategically important aspect of America. It is one of the closest engagements America will have in terms of rivalry with China. He pulled that out in the speech during the inauguration. Greenland, melting of the polar ice caps, very important strategic location for America to create to create some control over shipping lanes in the next few decades. There are going to be deals made over these things. He is trying to haggle for carpets in a souk in Morocco. He is going the furthest possible negotiating strategy. We're going to come in there, we're going to charge you, and we're going to pay for this. That is what he's doing. I can tell you now already behind the scenes, or if not behind the scenes, already in process, are a lot of deals But when in the end you're going to say, hey, but that guy was threatening to invade us, but now what we have is a bilateral agreement between America and Greenland and whatever, or with the Panama Canal. This is starting bidding New York way of disarming and negotiate. It's a negotiating strategy. Don't take him literally at this. And the same with tariffs. Tariffs are a tool. He is throwing out 100% tariffs here. Tariffs are a very effective tool if wielded properly. So it is a thread, it's a stick. Tariffs are a stick. And I listened to the confirmation hearing for the Treasury Secretary, a very, very measured. I would actually urge anybody to go and listen to Scott Bessent on his confirmation hearing, and how the Treasury Secretary will use tariffs. He was talking about 10%. He was talking about how you use it. And also, interestingly, anybody who's worried about social kind of conservatism, Scott Bessent is a gay man with a husband and 2 kids who lives in Charleston. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting look behind the bluster, look behind the kind of weird articulation of some of this, and look at the geostrategic things that he's pinning at. And I think you will see that there will be some deals made around geostrategic political imperatives like Greenland and like the Panama Canal.
And I think, if he said, we're coming for you 100% tariffs, then he comes in with 10%, people are going to say, you see, he is reasonable.
Exactly. And this is about, and this is what it is. So he's coming in with waving a big stick, playing crazy man. But really, in the end, America is a trust-based democracy, and they're not going to be invading Greenland. And so that, I think it's important to pull back the hysteria and kind of look strategically at what he has identified as key points.
Quite interesting also that he's chosen JD Vance, 45 or
Oh,
something, as a
40.
deputy vice president. I mean,
Yes.
he's a baby compared, in political circles.
Well, I think, I was hoping you would ask me about JD Vance because he's the future. And if you want to know where America is going and you want to understand the foundations that are being laid right now, you need to look at JD Vance. He's 40. He's the first millennial to have that kind of power. He's a Marine veteran. If you've not read Hillbilly Elegy, his book, I strongly urge people to go and read it. It's his story from being the kid of a opioid addicted mother in rural Appalachia, sort of just north of me, is a very profoundly moving story, and it's certainly an American story. And JD Vance is a very articulate, very smart, good man, despite the fact that he's piggybacked surprisingly on this Trump train. And many people, and it's same with the tech boys, because JD Vance is part of this Peter Thiel venture capitalist tech bro kind of thing. And if you ask, why did JD Vance and all these libertarian-minded lefties from San Francisco kind of piggyback on this Trump train in the last few years, this Make America Great kind of vehicle that was distasteful for many, sort of this very Christian nationalist, very kind of inward looking MAGA movement. And I was in the bush. I was back home in South Africa in November, and I was up in Welgevonden. I was watching a bunch of oxpeckers on the back of a rhino, and having a gin and tonic at sundowners. And
I
I
know
was
where you're
looking at
going.
that. Yep. And I thought to myself, JD Vance and the tech bros are the oxpeckers. They are, they've hitchhiked a ride on this big, rough rhino, this big old monster, which is the Republican Party slash the old Wall Street Donald Trump kind of old school old men, 80-year-olds. And these young, small, nimble, very, very quick thinking tech guys, young, have realized that the way that they can deregulate for the future is to hitch a ride on the back of this rhino. So there is a symbiotic relationship between JD Vance, Peter Thiel, David Sachs, Elon Musk, and all the Facebook and all the the Ubers and the Googles, all of them are moving on the back of this old MAGA Republican rhino. That that in many ways has been outplayed. So when you look about America, this is about these guys, the JD Vances, taking ownership of the future. And it's really interesting that it's the young guys, it is the innovators, it is the thinkers and the doers who have just taken control. And so for anybody who's lamenting the return of Trump, this is just the beginning of a shift in the way America is led. And I think in many ways it provokes a generational optimism if these guys can somehow help navigate the scariness of AI. And I think that's the key.
I think to me, those ox pickers, they knew that it would be a bumpy ride, and
Yeah.
they didn't particularly like the smell of the rhino, but
No.
it was part of the deal. You know,
Yeah.
when he was talking yesterday about his son Baron, and how one of the commentators perhaps was talking about how influential he's been with his dad about
Yeah.
this is what TikTok is, this is what you need to understand. There's nowhere I get lost with social media. Well, what chances has Donald got? He's got a few years on me. And the fact that he's even prepared to listen to anybody, they even intimated that occasionally he listens to his wife, even though he wasn't able to kiss her because of that silly hat.
She, the way she projects power or self-confidence is extraordinary. You could write books on the way that woman dresses. It's amazing. I mean, I don't like some of the stuff she wears, but it's interesting how she uses fashion as a tool to send a message.
Okay,
But
let's
anyway,
talk.
yes, as to Barron,
Yeah.
I think this is what is so key is that Trump is instinctively, again, you don't have to like him, but he is a disruptor. He built skyscrapers in New York. You can't even get a permit in Los Angeles to rebuild your house if it was burnt down for the next 3 years. So, I think there's a difference. This is a man who has negotiated with the mob. That is why Americans, it's like somebody suggested to me, like, it's like if you have a clogged toilet, you're not going to stick your hand down yourself and try and unblock it. You're going to hire a plumber. Donald Trump is the plumber. Americans have hired Donald Trump to unblock whatever this is. And they don't necessarily like him. No one wants to be a plumber. Nobody really wants. But he is the vehicle by which and what is interesting is that he has acknowledged that he is a disruptor, but he's gone and surrounded himself with a cabinet, an Oval Office full of disruptors who are going to also be, I think, if you're worried about them going kind of full libertarian and full Silicon Valley, he's also got in this cabinet and in the Oval Office those arch MAGAs, the Steve Bannons, the Christian nationalists, the real isolationists. And there's going to be this constant tug, and I hope balance between the sort of the different instincts of this team that he has. He sort of the Democrats like to mythologize Lincoln's team of rivals. And I'm interested to see how this sort of instincts between the globalists and the isolationists create a healthy tension within this leadership.
Yeah, I think the times are certainly going to be interesting. Is he going to claim credit for the Gaza Israel outcome?
I think he really has. I think what was so interesting about the lead up and how that this latest deal got done was that I don't know if you remember he kind of said all hell will break loose if something's not done, all hell will break loose, and a lot of people took that Trump would come in and invade some Middle Eastern country, or that all hell will break loose was aimed at Bibi Netanyahu. He was telling Bibi Netanyahu, get your right wingers in line, have a deal. I do not want to have to deal with all this nonsense. You need to get your domestic politics in line. So anybody who thinks that there's going to be a blank check for the Israelis is mistaken. However, there is going to be a constant and deep support for Israel and for the concept of the state of Israel. Hamas is considered a terrorist organization, is treated like a terrorist organization, and Trump is going to have absolutely no patience. He doesn't expect the ceasefire, you heard him yesterday, to last. But when asked sort of what he would do about it, he kind of shrugged it off and said, it's not my problem. It's their problem. It's their neighborhood. So when you're talking about the Middle East, when you're talking about Israel and the Palestinian territories, I think what Trump is going to, and I think it's already clear, is that he doesn't want this to be a thorn in his side. He doesn't want this to be constantly creating diversions for his bigger plan. It's a distraction for him. He wants the folks in the neighborhood, the neighbors, Jordan, Saudi, whoever, the UAE, he wants them to kind of come in and say, the Egyptians, this is a regional issue for him. He's going to support Israel, but he is also wanting the Saudis to get into the Abraham Accords. And so I think that is also, if you're talking about looking at this from a big picture point of view, that's his broader aim, because then the Saudis and the Israelis are talking, which we know they talk anyway, a massive amount of intelligence sharing between the Jordanians and the Saudis and the Israelis, and then he can focus on Iran. And I think in terms of an existential broader problem, Gaza's nothing. Iran and Iran's nuclear program are where there's going to be some big decisions that are going to have to be made. So if he wants Israel on his side, he needs Israel to focus on Iran. He doesn't want Israel distracted by Gaza.
And he's already said, I don't know how his friends in the Middle East are feeling. We're going to be the biggest oil producer on this planet. Well, nice for the guys who make their money out of oil. It's interesting to know what kind of conversations will go on. But he's definitely coming, with a very big stick.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of stuff to fix at home. I mean, I think that what's played out in Los Angeles with the fires and what just seems to be a total lack of leadership to me. How does this thing go so bad, so big, so fast? And all these, not everyone are the billionaires who live in the valley. So it's there's
Well,
lots
I mean,
of
what
things
is
fixing.
California? Yeah, California, what is it? Sixth or seventh biggest economy in the world. And like I said, it's tangled up with these sort of very worthy regulations. So if you lost your house in the last few weeks, it could potentially take you 3 years just to get the permit to rebuild. That is how absolutely convoluted it is in Los Angeles as well. And in terms of the way the Democratic LA sort of leadership seem to be very distracted by virtue signaling gender and equality and racial priorities instead of focusing on their main priority, the fire department. What's its main priority? To fight fires and save people. They were distracted, and I think there's going to be a very I think you're going to see a huge swing to the right politically. Many Californians are probably going to say this was ridiculous. Even if we support democratic principles, there's going to be, I think, in the next election, if not some of these people are recalled, you're going to see a voter backlash. But in terms of folks rebuilding in LA, I mean, I was looking at the numbers. I mean, it's just crazy because also a lot of the insurance companies, what had happened with the regulations, what the insurance companies had come to the Department of Insurance in Los Angeles and said, our weather modeling is saying that, what should be a once in a lifetime fire risk is now down to once in 5 years fire risk. We have to increase premiums. We cannot keep on, and the regulations and, were like, you can't increase premiums. And so they cancelled about, what was it, 30% of
Yeah,
some of
we
the,
then we can't insure. That's
and we
what they were
can't
saying.
insure. So that conversation was had, and the sort of the free marketers will say, well, see, we told you so. But either way, something needs to be done about that sort of morose of regulations. What it does then also is artificially bump up prices. And I was looking at the stats. I mean, I think if you want the medium average of a house price in LA in that area was around, the cheapest you could get was about 7 or 8 million. Most of these houses were up, going up to 50 million. So if you want to try and rebuild a $7 or $8 million house in Pacific Palisades, once you've got your permit, once you've paid for your permit, once everything's cleaned up, whenever that is, you're probably going to have to be earning around $14 million to be able to afford to build a $7 million house again. The cost of building is, what was, I think it was $1,000 a square meter. So, I think for many people, they are going to have to write this off. And you're going to have an entire generation of kids and families, middle class, many of them, who have just had this most life-changing event. And I think it played into Donald Trump's sort of argument that,
We got to fix it.
you've got to slimline stuff because the consequences are dire if you don't.
Robyn, I've loved chatting with you again, catching up. Thank you for
Yes,
your outsider's insight.
my pleasure.
There's a working title.
There we go.
But
Thank you. I
I'm
might
sure
have to steal that.
I'm sure it's been done before. But thank you so much, and let's catch up again soon.
Absolutely. And all the best and much love to all of you in South Africa.
Thanks, Robyn.
Cheers.